Hey, friends, welcome back to the Yoga of School podcast. Tom and I had the pleasure of sitting down with Jesus Zepeda, our new sustainability coordinator, who has a beautiful and touching vision of the future and what's possible when we connect to nature, connect to the earth, connect to the plants. We really love this episode and we think it is a powerful path forward.
My job is to speak for the trees and for those in our community that cannot speak for themselves. The lorax of our campus.
It's a remembering.
We need to make sure we grow at the speed of trust.
The turning.
The land belongs to no one, but it is ours to protect. I made a promise to the earth that I would give the earth everything that was mine to give. And the most precious thing that is mine to give is my time.
All right. Good morning.
Hey, everybody.
Good morning. I'm really happy to be on the podcast finally. I've heard a lot about it. Thank you for having me.
We are so excited to have you. You were one of the characters we had identified early on as wanting to come on. So thanks for making time and doing whatever it took for you to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you is Jesus Zepeda. So he's our sustainability coordinator here at school. Also teaches environmental systems and societies. You have both ends of the spectrum, really. You've got some grade six science, so integrated science, kind of at that beginning part of education, and then at the end, in the DP space, the environmental systems and societies. And then I think farm to table, right?
And aquaponics.
Yeah.
Very.
What does a sustainability coordinator do?
So when I talk to the sixth graders or the younger kids, my main role, I'd tell them, is to be the lorax of our campus. My job is to speak for the trees and for those in our community that cannot speak for themselves. So I'm here to represent them.
I love that. Okay. That's awesome. We need more of that.
How are they receiving that message?
You know, I was hanging out with the lower school sustainability coordinator during their eco-delegate meeting. And what really surprised me was that the kids just know. And I feel like as we get older, sometimes we forget that. Even the high schoolers sometimes seem to forget that when I'm talking to my 11th graders. But these young kids, she showed them the trash can, or our recycling container, and somebody had thrown trash in there, and there were gasps. Like, why would somebody do that? Their ideas about what we should do. We need to clean up our space. We need to make sure we're not polluting. Like, these are, I believe they were fourth graders and second graders, but they just know. And I think sometimes when I talk to older people, they talk about how we need to go and educate the public. But here I was sitting with second graders and fourth graders that are already saying all the right things.
Yeah. It's a remembering
Yeah.
for adults,
Yeah.
right? And energy work and healing and yoga, the young kids already know it. Consciousness, they have it. They're born with it. And it's the enculturation and it's the machine of the world, and that we have that separation, forgetting that happens. That's so interesting. Great. And so what else are you really passionate about in your life? What are some of the things that you're working on?
Okay, so in my life, I remember this event or this feeling that I got when I traveled to New Zealand 2 years ago with my wife. And we're standing in Milford Sound, New Zealand, a tour of the sound. And it is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. And in this moment, I felt such a connection, such a love to the earth. And in that space, I made a promise. And I said, I will give this planet everything that I have.
Right.
My life, my money, whatever is mine to give, I will give it to you. And so at the end of the day, I'm just a man. I don't know everything. There's a lot of things that I'm learning along the way. But I trust that I'm smart enough to listen to what the land and the dirt and the plants are telling me. I don't believe I'm wiser than anybody else. I believe maybe I'm just a good listener when it comes to the dirt. I grew up eating a lot of dirt, so maybe that has something to do with it.
Maybe.
Yeah. No, I remember you telling us a story of your boyhood, and kind of the kind of life that you lived, and that that seems to feed exactly into that place. I've been to that Milford Sound. I actually made some deep life promises there too, man. So I understand that energy.
There are these places that just, when you experience the energy there, when you see the love that this planet has for us, when you experience that, when you really feel that in your soul, it changes you. It really changes you.
Yeah, Costa Rica is that place for me.
Yeah. Just all engines firing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But maybe you could recount that. You just sort of the way you grew up and those sort of behaviors and how you're pulling them forward into your adult life.
Absolutely. So I was born in the town of Tizapan El Alto in Jalisco, Mexico. And it was honestly one of the best times of my life growing up there, because I was very lucky that I grew up in a place where I got to experience a lot of freedom. Once I got home from school, like, you would change out of your school clothes, you got on your bike and you hung out with your friends. If you got hungry, there was a lot of fruit trees around that you could, grab guavas at a certain time of the year. I remember going to part of the town used to be a huge mango plantation. And so there were an area of our town where there was a lot of mango trees, and you ride your bike with your friends and you pick up a couple of rocks and you're throwing rocks at the mangoes, and that's your lunch or your snack. My house, we were one of the first people to kind of move into our neighborhood. So most of the land was still fairly undeveloped. And so I had essentially what was a huge open space, a huge prairie in front of my house that I could explore. And when the rainy season came, the entire area would kind of flood. And so seeing the frogs, there was a lot of frogs in my neighborhood. People used to call it El Barrio Cantarranas, which means the neighborhood where the frogs sing, because in the rainy season, I remember walking down my street and it looked like the road was just opening up in front of you because there were so many little toads running around. And people used to complain that they were not able to sleep at night because of the frogs. But to me, maybe because I was born there and I grew up there, I felt like I could sleep better when the frogs were singing. Yeah. It was really magical because the circus, when the circus came to town, the circus would set up in front of my house. So I would wake up in the morning and there would be zebras grazing outside of my door. I remember one time in particular, there was an elephant. So I was a small child. I was very curious and adventurous. So I was able to fit through the holes of our gate, Yeah. So I snuck out of my house and I walked across this field and I picked up some grass, and, here's a 6-7-year-old me just hanging out with an elephant, just totally unsupervised, and looking at this creature in the eye. And I felt like it understood me, and I felt like it knew I didn't mean any harm, and it just took my grass and it allowed me to touch it. And then I went back home. Yeah. And I don't know if, there are many people that would allow their child to do that, or I don't know, there are many people, especially in this country, that can have those experiences anymore.
We've talked about that, I think, in other places in the podcast, sort of the importance of play, kind of play for your emotional health, overall health, also play as far as learning goes.
Yes.
How a lot of it has seemingly been, kind of suppressed or pushed out for other things.
Yeah. And I grew up climbing trees and chasing my grandmother's chickens and playing around with the sheep and the goats, the roosters. And I think growing up like that, kind of fairly unsupervised, but still having, if I got hurt, I could run home.
Yeah.
It made me very confident. Like I am not scared to jump when I have to jump. And I believe that I will be smart enough to figure it out as I go.
Yeah. That's just beautiful. That's like a fantasy childhood that I would love to provide for my children, or I see that the world is going in a direction where that type of childhood would be the most beneficial from what's happening now.
Definitely. I think parents have a large role to play in this. I was very lucky that I had really amazing parents. Both of my parents, my mom especially, we grew up in a home that was full of love. We were never extremely wealthy, but my parents made sure that we never went hungry, that we always had clothes, and that we were just surrounded by love all the time. And my parents grew up incredibly poor. My family comes from a very poor area, and they were really, really poor, but I feel incredibly grateful for the sacrifices that they made for me and my siblings, because we have never known suffering in that way. And we just grew up with all the love that we wanted.
Probably the greatest wealth.
Mm-hmm. And I think that made a big difference. So like, parents that are listening, really, love your children. It makes a big difference, but also kind of create that space where they can experience freedom, just with the understanding that if they need something, they will come to you.
Will you say that sentence again? Parents, if you're listening.
Parents, if you're listening, really love your kids. Love your kids deeply, but give them freedom. Let them explore. Sometimes we're going to fall off a tree, and that's okay. When we get hurt, when we need to, we come to you. Yeah. I'm 31 years old, and I still go to my mom. Like the other day I had an ear infection. I said, Mom, my ear hurts. And she's over there, cooking up something that she puts in my ear. Yeah. So we will never forget and I had this beautiful experience with, I was just in Toronto at a global conference for climate change. And our Uber driver, we started making conversation. His name was Ibrahim. And I always ask this question of anybody that walks into my classroom. What is something you know now that you wish you had known when you were my age, or whatever my student's age happened to be at the time? And what he said to me was, trust your parents.
Okay.
Your parents love you more than anyone or anything else. Trust them.
Yeah. I think it's kind of default. Like parents would kind of hear that and be like, yeah, I love my kids.
Mm-hmm. I think they would. Yeah. And I think they do.
They do.
Right. I think it's, boy, there's so much coming up. There's a lot coming up. But I think that love your parents kind of combines to love the indigenous wisdom, love the animal truth, love the kind of what you're getting at. I mean, it's abstract, but the beautiful intelligence of the planet, however you want to put that. You could put it in a religious term. You could put it in a deep scientific term, but there's sort of like a holding and an awareness and a cherishing of like long strands of knowing, and I think that that's essentially what's under relentless attack now, is just, the digitized world just kind of hacks at that, right? And I spent last week in some training up in Boulder around experiential learning, and that the thought that we've explored in here and that just keeps coming up in my mind is this: we're at a place where we might lose this knowledge. I think, the machine, the factory, the deep capitalist world, all those things. And then you feel like everybody feels that loss, out there, and finding ways to deal with the present reality, but somehow not lose that. And then that takes you to the technology, because I know the technology is, like, in some ways helping scientists understand animal language, right? Like creating the ability to communicate more deeply, or more deeply understand the world around us. So that, that's happening at a really incredible level. Meanwhile, at the same time, it feels like the train's to me, it's just going off the track. And so much of our day is spent out of our body, away from those things that we're talking about.
And going back to New Zealand, the Maori people of New Zealand, when they introduced themselves back 32 generations, back to
walk you through it.
Yes, back to the river and the mountain where they're from. And part of their teaching is that this river, this mountain, that is my grandmother, that is my grandfather, they are my ancestors. So going back to parents loving their children and children loving their parents, when you understand that the river, the creek, the mountain, the prairie, that they are your ancestors, that they love you in the way that your parents love you, then you're not going to want to harm them. Then we're going to start asking, well, why are we throwing our garbage here?
Yes. Yeah.
Why,
separation.
Yeah. You would never hurt your grandparents.
No. Yeah. The original mother, Pachamama, our earth. This is our home. To love it. to get connected to
Mhm.
it. When you ask me who I am, and I tell you I'm near this river and this mountain, that's who I am.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Mm,
That's
I think
inspiring.
every place comes with its instructions, and when you choose to live in a place, you need to understand what the instructions are to the place where you're living in. Some water, some places water is fairly abundant, others are not. And like, I think like you were mentioning earlier, we were talking, and when you can just turn on the sink, where you can go in a nice building like we have here, and you have artificial lights, and you control the weather inside the building. Essentially, we forget that we are the earth, and the earth is us, right? Essentially, we are the universe experiencing itself. Um,
Yeah. We were down in Costa Rica a couple of weeks ago, and I remember you saying we're in the water in the Pacific, and you were saying this is essentially just just all the elements, all the minerals in the seawater. Yes, the longer you're in there, the more the exchange is just getting back to that original state.
Yeah, I mean, we become the things we put in our bodies, and the things we put in our bodies are coming from the earth. We are made of these. We are it.
Yeah,
That's why this artificial world doesn't feel good and becomes part of the health issues, right? All of these man-made chemicals and things.
But even all these man-made things come from the earth.
That's yeah, I know that, yeah.
So I don't know that there's a separation.
mm-hmm.
I think maybe we just need to stop and ask ourselves, how do we respect this place that we live in? How do we love this place that we live in? And I think the hard part is that now, because we've kind of drifted very far into this, social construct that we have, it requires a lot of change. And I think intuitively people resist change. But one of the quotes that was brought up in the conference that I went to is, we need to make sure we grow at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
And so before we can make all these changes, I think the biggest thing we need is not necessarily, education is always important, but we need people to go back and to touch the dirt, to touch the tree, and to really understand that they are part of this, that it is them that they are feeling, that we are not a separate entity, that we're all one living entity together on this rope floating in space. And I think when you understand that, when you see these places and these rivers and these creeks as your ancestors, and that they are you, then when you see the way that we are treating each other in this world, we're dropping bombs on each other, or arresting each other, you wouldn't do that to yourself. You would love yourself. You would love your children. And I think we all need a pause. We all need, a deep breath, and we all need to kind of ground ourselves and understand that we are a family, that we are each other, that we are part of something great.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea. There's so many things that are touching on the yoga philosophies and conscious philosophies in the words that you're saying, and it's all resonating really powerfully. I'd like to come back to the work that you're doing here, and maybe we could tie it. Like, what's the vision of coming to this school and working on sustainability? What's that road lead to?
So for me, that goes back to teaching our families, our students, to feel the love of nature. So one of the first things or the thing that I keep coming back to is this concept of growing deep roots. This is my first year in the Audi community. So I have to figure out where my place is, figure out how I fit into this community. And once we grow these deep roots, then we can flower. So for my first year, I'm really focused on my relationships with our students here in our community here. Who are the students that are passionate about this, that already intuitively feel that attraction to the earth and feel that love and are willing to do something about it? So as I make those connections, I have now different students that are starting to grow native flowers, different students that are starting to take care of our hydroponic systems or aquaponic systems. And these are really, really passionate students. And now they're bringing their friends. And that also helps me because,
Kind of webs it out.
yes. We have so many sustainability projects at Audi. While I was at this conference, it made me really proud because I was seeing a lot of the other work that other schools were doing. And all I kept thinking about is, we are already doing this at Audi. We're doing that at Audi. Oh man, I could bring that to Audi. And I know we could even do it better than what I'm seeing here.
Mm.
And our students are really, really standing up to that challenge.
Probably this is the moment for shout out to Olivier Logette.
Yes.
Your predecessor. He's in France now, but
Yes.
I think in a lot of ways he was that person that helped us take those first steps.
Yes.
And then you're picking it up. The thing that occurred, you talked about that web, kind of creating that web and you being sensitive to our community, but you're also bringing some communities with you. And I think that's really interesting. The work that you're doing with the,
Galveston Bay Foundation.
Yeah, the Galveston Bay Foundation. Maybe talk a little bit about that and how you're bringing that community into our community.
Absolutely. So when I moved back to Houston, I began volunteering at the Galveston Bay Foundation at the Eco Center in Baytown, growing native plants because it seemed to me that was a really obvious thing to do if we can restore habitat protected by growing plants. And so we are partnered with the University of Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And they're helping us design a nursery here on campus where we hope to grow a lot of vegetables and native plants. But a large section of those native plants will go right back to the Galveston Bay Foundation. So Carter, who works for the Galveston Bay Foundation, he collects a lot of native plant seeds and he donates a lot of them to us. And so we're going to germinate them, get them to a size where they can be transported back and go straight into conservation in our area.
Yeah. It's almost like we're going to become a little bit of an incubator.
Yes.
I love that.
And that is the hope. I think if we're thinking about the future, right? And schools, we're in the business of creating the future by influencing, young minds. There is no future without sustainability, at least not for us, not in the way we have here now. So if there is going to be change, if we're going to go back to these ideas that we've been discussing, that starts here. That starts in places like Audi, where our students can reconnect to those things. So my job as a sustainability coordinator is to create those opportunities for our students and to foster that love, because it's already within our community. It's already within our students. They already love nature. But I think sometimes maybe they need a bit of direction as to what direction to go or how to maybe do things before they can really flourish. So I see that as my main role here, not as, the person with the ultimate wisdom and the ultimate answer, but of somebody that is very good at, first of all, listening and finding the people that deeply care about something and providing them with the resources and guidance they need to achieve whatever that means for them.
It's beautiful. I think when in the pod, we've kind of entertained this idea about AI and the future of schools and what it all means from an educational standpoint and the factory model being exhausted. And this feels to me like what's coming up for me is this idea that this is a path forward. This is the next thing that we could easily benefit and ensure the happiness of our future by putting some effort in.
Yeah. I don't know if this term was coming up in your conference because you were up in Toronto and I was up in Boulder, but a phrase that came up a couple times that really grabbed my attention is that a couple of people use this phrase, the turning, and it's kind of, I hadn't heard it put that way, but sort of the idea that in educational history, there's been different turns, towards the technical, towards the social emotional, towards the therapeutic, as some people think. And then I think when we're in the optimistic frame, we're feeling that, hey, there is some turning out there. There's all these massive challenges. There's the whole alarmist piece of the climate change discussion. But then there's also this other counter movement of people turning towards those kind of things you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And then I think a lot of it for me is just trusting to go with the turn. and not get distracted into where we are, but keep sort of pushing for where we might be.
And I think people have been saying, the world is ending for as long as there's been people. And so far we're still here. So I wouldn't put money on that this is the end.
Yeah.
I believe that as long as we give the world a chance, the world will heal. And when the world heals, we heal. So I believe that once we provide that space and once we kind of reconnect and we maybe restructure the things that in our society we believe are important, when we prioritize our health and our well-being, and through our health and well-being, the health of our planet, then everything else will kind of fall into use. Because when you care for the river as your parent, as your ancestor, then you're not going to just think about all the profits that you could get by destroying it. You're going to care for it.
Yeah.
And in a way, like, gardening can also set you free from a lot of those constraints, because I think we've kind of been tricked that if there's something you need to go buy that from a store. And if you don't have money, well, then you can't do that. And so you become trapped in the system of consumerism, where when you learn to look at the planet and you see that the planet gives you everything that you need, and you at the very least learn to grow some of your food, that begins to set you free from that, because I no longer need to go to the store to purchase more stuff. I have everything I need right here, and I love this patch of dirt, and this patch of dirt loves me.
That really lights me up, trying to hack the system. That's the ultimate hack, is freedom right there. That's the freedom that we're looking for, is to be self-sustaining and not dependent on some corporation for our livelihood or sustain continuance.
So I think it requires a frame shift.
Yeah.
And how we do that is through education. I was hanging out by the Science Museum the other day with one of our teachers here, and there's a quote on the little. They have like a little like mound, and at the very top it says something along the lines of, if you think within a year, you plant a seed. If you think within decades, you plant a tree. If you are thinking in hundreds of years, you teach. And so all these things we're speaking about, these are the places where those things become a reality. And it has to be bigger than the three of us here. It has to be bigger than this campus. It requires everyone. It requires connection between the world. And so I think once we see that shift toward loving our planet and toward protecting it and being good stewards of it, I think there's a quote from the Lion King that I really like. It says that the land belongs to no one, but it is ours to protect. Once we understand that, then I think a lot of other things will fall into place, because these are very complicated problems. Even one of the things we were looking at is, if you want to make a product that's more, better for our planet, a lot of people think, we replace plastic jars with glass jars. But even making glass is really energy intensive. It requires a lot of resources to get the sand, and especially to heat it up. That requires a vast amount of power. So sitting here, I don't know the answer to all the problems, and I don't know that there is one answer to every problem. But I think when we learn to trust each other, and again, trust the planet, we will get closer to whatever that is. And I think we just need to listen. We just need to listen to the plants and the trees and the earth.
So my counseling psychology background, I'm looking at my engineering is coming in whenever you're saying, hey, we need to trust ourselves and love each other and love the planet. And my question is, like, why aren't we doing those things yet? Right. And then I start to kind of rewind it a little bit, and we've lost connection with ourselves. We're not trusting ourselves or loving ourselves. And that's where the mindfulness tools and the counseling, therapeutic stuff comes in. I kind of operate under this philosophy from local to global. And what I mean by that is when I love myself, then I'm able to love you, and then my school, and then my city, and then the world. But I really need to make sure I love myself first. So I would say 95% of the time when I'm working with a new client, we work on self-care and that foundation of self-care. That is acts of love to yourself first. And it's like you're filling your cup, and then you're able to.
Exactly. And I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with one of my students yesterday where my students are taking a test right now, and we are in a very high achieving community where the kids really, really care about making sure that they have high test grades. They are very driven, and they have big, big goals. And he said, Mr. Zepeda, I'm going to skip playing basketball with my friends so that I can study for your test. And I told him to not do that. I said, don't do that. If you want to do well on your test, if you want to do well in life, there's 3 things that you must do first. You always get enough sleep. You make sure you're eating healthy, and you exercise a little bit, and you hang out with your friends. Do that first. Everything else will fall into place once you get those things. Because this is a very hardworking student. I said, if you come into this test and you do bad tomorrow, it's not because you were not trying. It's because I failed you as a teacher.
Yeah. Or this is a step in the road, not this definitive event. And we've talked a lot about that too. You use the words high achievement culture, which has been part of, I think, almost every episode. And then, what's wellness look like within that? And, kind of that concurrent theme of if the goal is really not for you, but for somebody else, or some perception of what it should be, the process doesn't necessarily generate a lot of agency either. And what sort of circles me back to, I think when you're talking about this, you're talking about your listening and your awareness of these cycles. It's sort of the agency of that life force, right? And trying to understand that. And I'm remembering when you came for your interview. I don't know if you remember this, but you brought seeds with you. I remember at the end of the at the end of the demo lesson, you busted out these seed packets and I think the kids were like, "Whoa, who's this guy?" But some took them, I think, right?
Yes. I had a couple of students that took them. So I've been growing native plants. When I moved back to Houston, the first thing I did was I got rid of my front lawn. I got rid of all the grass, and I planted a native wildflower garden. And so I have these plants that I've now had a relationship with for going on 5 years, and I've raised generations of these plants. These plants came from different places where I was volunteering, Sheldon Lake, the Galveston Bay Foundation. They ended up in my lawn, and then they went to the campus where I was working, and we grew them there, and my students there took them home, and parents took them home. Other schools took them for their gardens. And I had this really beautiful moment where I knew one of the reporters from the Baytown Sun came and got a lot of plants for me, and she was going to put them in the planters outside of where they write the newspaper. And I was on my way home, and I took a roundabout way home, and my wife asked me what I was doing. And I said, I need to go check on my babies. Like, I know that those are my plants. And so I would go out of my way to drive through the Baytown Sun office so that I could see how these plants that came from me were doing. And it was just such an amazing feeling to start driving around town, and you drive through some of your students' houses, and they're your students because there are landscape coreopsis growing in their front lawns.
Yeah, man, when you get old like me, I could see you driving around town and saying, "I just got to go check on my kids,"
Yes.
and making sure they're still putting some love back into this planet. I love that.
And then people get really excited. Like some of the people that first early on started taking some of these plants home, like they still message me and they say, "Hey, look, this is how the gardens are doing," or "This is now the 3rd year that I have these plants in my lawn." They still look beautiful.
It's amazing. Well, one of the questions that I wanted to address in this podcast episode was the idea of what role does sustainability and gardening have in the future communities and the future schools and the future space of education? And we answered it throughout the podcast without indirectly.
Yeah.
If you look at the content of this podcast, it's all there. Coming back to roots, no pun intended, right? This ancient way of living, which is connected to our nature, our plants, our ecosystem, and finding the healing there and watching it spread.
Yeah, no, I had another interesting moment in Canada. After the convention, we went back to the hotel, and there was a wooded area behind the hotel. So me and another teacher that I had met, we decided we were going to go for a hike in the wooded area behind the hotel. And we walked down this path, and we get to this creek, and we see there's a family fishing, a man and his son. And his son was probably about 12 years old, if I had to guess. And they pull out this giant fish, a giant salmon. And it's a huge fish. And he's super excited. And we start chit-chatting with them because, of course, we wanted to see this giant fish. And
you're in Toronto, right?
Yes.
You're in downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
Pulling salmon out of the street.
And so he started telling us all about how these are invasive Chinook salmon that somebody brought to the lake. And now that it turned out to not be so bad because they're bringing nutrients up, the creeks. And he's telling us about the geography of the place and the type of rock and, the directions of the creeks, and they're all flowing to Lake Ontario. He starts to talk to us about the pollution in Lake Ontario. He starts telling me about the different population densities in Canada. I mean, the amount of information that this young boy knew is really, really impressive. And after we left, I was talking to this teacher. He was from California. And we said, how many kids in the United States could have that same level of conversation that we just had with this 12-year-old from this random creek we just happened to be walking through?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an opportunity for us here, for sure.
When we talk to our kids, how many famous people can they name? How many movie stars can they name? How many different TV shows can they name? And then turn that kind of around. How many different trees can they name? How many plants can they name? How many rocks can they identify?
Yeah.
And so if we were able to turn that, I think we would make a huge amount of progress. And to me, that starts in education. And that is what I teach. I made a promise to the earth that I would give the earth everything that was mine to give. And the most precious thing that is mine to give is my time. And so that's what I teach. That's why I teach. I want my kids to understand that we are part of something larger and bigger than ourselves. I want my kids to understand that the earth loves them and that there's so much love on this planet. And I want them to not just understand it, but to feel it. And I want all of us to realize that we're not each other's enemies. This planet provides. And if we're willing to listen and learn, we are going to be okay.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's incredible. I just want to thank you for being willing to go where you just went. Because I think that when this thing here is most fully functional, it's in that tender, vulnerable, loving space, and the ability to go there. These are important ideas. This is our one wild and precious life. What are we going to do with it? So, thanks for being here today. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for the work. It's been an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. That love that we seek and we feel like we don't have is available to us, and all of these beautiful trees and plants and the earth that we're sitting on, and this rock.
Yeah.
It's there. We just need to listen.
Yeah. If you guys want to get any more of that action this Sunday morning, garden project, Audi Community Yoga. We don't just talk about it. So maybe we'll see you there.
We're doing a pollinator garden if anybody's interested in helping out.
There you go. All right.
Wonderful. Thanks again, brother. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Let the conversation continue.
Namaste.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Stay.